All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekly Dharma Gathering. My name is Sheena, and I will be your host for tonight. Tonight's session, Reclaiming Lineages, will be led by Dr. Shanté Smalls. They will lead us through a guided meditation, Dharma talk, and we'll close with a Q&A discussion. Tonight's session will be recorded, so if you prefer not to be seen, feel free to turn your camera off. And please note that when you ask a question, you will also be recorded. So if you want to enter questions into the chat, that's always fine to do. And the recording of tonight's gathering will be available within 48 hours. If you just log into your Weekly Dharma Vimeo account, you will get a notification from us once the video is posted. And I will introduce you to our teacher, who it seems all of you know already, Dr. Shanté Paradigm Smalls, pronounced they, them, is a teacher and student in Vajrayana Tantric Buddhism. They currently study under Lama Rod Owens and Lama Justin Von Huaydash, who are co-founders of Bhumi Sparsha. Shanté began studying and practicing Buddhism at the age of 17 and has practiced in Zen, Soka Gaiki International, Shambhala, and Bhumi Sparsha communities. They began on the teaching path in 2009 and were authorized by the Shambhala lineage to teach meditation and Buddha Dharma in 2015. Shanté is focused on the healing impact of meditation in Black and Indigenous communities, people of color communities, LGBTQ+ communities, and incarcerated and recovery communities. Shanté is a teacher on the Liberate app and is a lead teacher and co-founder of Weekly Dharma Gathering. Shanté identifies as Black Indigenous person who is queer and queer gender and genderqueer, apologies. They live on Canarsie, Munsee, Lenape, Hogan territory, which is also known as Brooklyn, New York. Shanté, please teach us.
Thank you so much, Sheena, and thank you for dealing with the various languages that are in my bio. I appreciate that. Algonquin and I don't know, whatever else is in there, Sanskrit. I think Lama Justin's last name is Bulgarian. So, you know, we've got all that many things represented. Thank you all for coming tonight live and welcome. I'm glad you're here. And for those of you who will be joining later in time, recorded, also welcome. I'm looking up a little bit because I have a monitor laptop thing set up to help me see better. So sometimes I may look at my laptop, but I'll be looking up a little bit. So tonight's talk is really something that's been on my mind and my heart for a while. And I'm really thinking about it and feeling into it more from a place of, you know, my own experience, my conversations with my teachers, you know, Lama Justin and Lama Rod over the last couple of years, and my own, you know, experience as a African person living in the Americas. I think a lot about ancestry and lineage and kinship, and so I was like, oh, you know, I should maybe do a little talk on this. So, you know, for some of you, for some of us, the link to ancestors in particular is maybe part of our cultural heritage or part of our religious heritage, you know, and for others that may be, it may be a little bit more, that maybe relationship may be a little bit more opaque or distant, but that doesn't really matter. This is really a conversation about lineage, and so I'll say a little bit more about what I'm talking about, what I mean when I say that. So the description I wrote to this talk was, how do we work with our respective lineages, whether they are familial, ancestral, spiritual, or other forms of kinship. So, um, uh, I'm in an academic lineage, right? So, who my mentor was and who his mentor was and so forth, and who students I've mentored. So things like that, or other kinds of, lineages. Um, can meditation practices aid us in discerning what is useful and what is not in our various lineages? So in our family lineages, in our work lineages, in our uh, spiritual lineages. And why is lineage so important in meditation, particularly but not only in tantric tradition? So I'd like to welcome us, and just for myself, and if you feel also comfortable, do some opening gratitude to the ancestors, my ancestors, your ancestors, all of our ancestors, and particularly the ancestors and the descendants of the territory I'm on, the Canarsie, Munsee, Lenape people, to the people who live here now, continue to live here, as well as their forebearers. And I just want to ask for their blessing and forgiveness for living on their territory without permission, and to really show us and demonstrate how we may in the present honor and make amends to the people who lived and died here and were killed here and displaced from here, and who continue to live, work, and love and work to reclaim their land. My indigenous lineage is not the Canarsie, Munsee, Lenape people. Lenape territory takes up a lot of territory from Hudson Valley, New York, all the way down to Delaware, all the way west to mid-Pennsylvania. But I just want to call those ancestors and that lineage in. And my inspiration for tonight's talk is really my own familial and spiritual lineages, and the problems and possibilities and power of both of those lineages. So we'll start with a meditation. So I invite you to get comfortable, and you can feel free to sit, stand, walk, or lay down. There are many purposes of meditation, but one purpose is really to be relaxed with however you are at this moment, and not to really try to improve yourself. It's not a really self-improvement project, but really to get to know yourself, as it were. Get to know what's happening now. So relax, and we want to ground into the earth, our mother. Maybe at the points where your feet in your seat touch the earth, or its stand-ins, the chair, the cushion. Feeling this deep connection to our first mother, right? Come from a lineage of, well, now humans, but before that, a whole bunch of other beings. Feeling the weight of gravity holding you. And then also rising up, the waist up, feeling all that open space above you and around you. In the sky is the father sky and our siblings, the planets, the stars. Other beings. And then feeling to your more local environment at the kind of part level, what's in your room and the other beings that exist at this level with you. Feeling into your body, noticing how it feels. not trying to change it or improve it or fixate, but just feeling how you're feeling. Checking in with your emotional state, just to know what you're working with. Taking the temperature of your emotions, as it were. And then checking into your mind state, your discursive mind. Because we practice with our body, our emotions, our mind, our speech, our energetic body, our physical body. And then just begin to feel your body as it's breathing, which you've been doing this whole time. Softening the front of the body, melting any points of tension. Sometimes that can be the jaw, the throat, forehead, the belly, shoulders, hips. Or anywhere else that feels tense or rigid. And while you're feeling your body breathing, I invite you, if you would like, you certainly don't have to call in any helpful ancestors, beings, living or in another plane, or lineage, known or imagined. Only those who are helpful, supportive, loving, and the relationship is uncomplicated. It's not tainted. Call in anyone who may support you in your practice. Any being, doesn't have to be a human being. Doesn't have to be someone you've met or know. It may be someone who's on your ancestor shrine, or maybe someone who you read often, or listen to, or watch their or look at their paintings or watch them in a movie. Anyone who feels supportive in any of your lineages. And imagine that they are surrounding you. You're in a semicircle with them. They are supporting you and protecting you, guiding you, helping you in this lifetime and beyond. They, as the saying goes, have your back. And if you can't fully imagine anyone, just imagine the feeling, maybe in your heart center or your belly, of when it feels good when someone supports you, when some being feels supportive. And if things feel a bit chaotic or uncomfortable or confusing, you can just place your attention and awareness on the feeling of your body breathing, and you don't have to worry about anything else. And you can begin to let your ancestors or beings or supportive people dissolve back into space, thanking them for their support and their willingness to show up whenever you call. Thank them for being helpful, for loving you and supporting you on your journey. And they're welcome to stick around if they would like, but they're also welcome to go back wherever they've been. Leaving you with in protected space, loving space, sacred space. And slowly coming back into your body and relaxing out of the meditation at your own pace. Maybe twisting, turning, stretching, taking a drink of water or tea, or doing whatever you need or want to do to be here now. I'd also like to, if you don't mind, just call in one of my favorite lineage ancestors, Padmasambhava or Padmakara or Guru Rinpoche. And for those of you who know this chant, which is different versions of this are endemic to all Indo-Himalayan tantric lineages. The 7-line supplication to Padmakara, which starts with a seed syllable, H-U-M, and it's sung to a melody. So I'll just do it once. Sometimes you do it 3 or more times. In the northwest of the land of Udayana, on a blooming lotus flower, you have attained supreme wondrous city. You are renowned as Padmakara, surrounded by a retinue of many dakinis. We practice following your example. Please approach and grant your blessing. Guru Padma Siddhi. So Guru Rinpoche was a tantric master who was born in what is now Swat, Pakistan, but it was then known as Udyana, and was part still of India before obviously the partition of the last century. And he introduced Tibet. He was invited by the king at the time of Tibet, or that region of Tibet, who wanted him to come and help tame some of the energy, let's say, of the land. And he brought Tantric Buddhism to Tibet, which is why Tantric Buddhism looks so much like Hinduism. And then Tantric Buddhism mixed with the Bon religion and the other religions. And he established the first monastery there, 8th century. And Padma means lotus. He's the lotus born. There's nothing about Padmasambhava, but I just wanted to just say a little bit about him. And he is, an example for many tantric practitioners of someone who is not only a deep and powerful practitioner, but also someone who is willing to help others. Turn on my little light. It's getting dark in New York. Willing to be of service to others, willing to help others with their practice. And so that's, really where a big part of my own spiritual lineage. But I was thinking about this for two very specific reasons. This topic of reclaiming lineages. One, so to reclaim means to so there are a couple of meanings. One, to retrieve or recover something previously lost, given, or paid. So like, it's a return or claim back or take back, regain. Or to bring under cultivation, like reclaiming land that's gone fallow or something. And so I've been thinking about this in relationship to this system of lineage, which you could say is like a root system connecting us, but it's also the trunk, the branches, the leaves, the wind, the rain, the animals that inhabit the tree, and so forth. It is something living with which we can have a relationship. It goes backwards, forwards, and in all directions, and we're in the middle of all of that. And so what can happen, of course, in lineages, whether it's a familial lineage or spiritual lineage or a work lineage or something, is that there's can be conflict, of course. There can be harm, there can be violence, there can be misunderstanding, there can be disruption from others. So in terms of my own historical lineage, there's just a point that I don't, not even, while still in this country, there are, Black people weren't allowed to keep records. So I think I know my grandmother's grandparents. That's so 4 generations as far back as I know, so far. And so that's not very far back. And so there's a lot of imagination. There's a big gap in my lineage of people who were born on this continent. And then, of course, the forced removal from our ancestral lands, some of which I know, destroyed, or didn't destroy, but disrupted the transmission of lineage, connections, traditions, cultural artifacts, names. And so that's one way to uproot people and really make them take on other traditions and norms that aren't their own. And so there's disruption that can happen in lineage. There's, in the tantric tradition, they say the unbroken lineage because it's passed on orally from student to teacher, or sometimes from being to student who becomes the teacher. But there's also violence and misunderstanding and lack of protection that can occur in our families, that can occur in our spiritual lineages. And so sometimes when that happens, there's a very natural and perfectly understandable reaction sometimes to either, to do one of few things, either to kind of double down on, well, it's my lineage, or it's, that's my family, and no one's going to tell me, and you just kind of take on everything, whether it's harmful or no longer helpful, or it's just plain wrong, right? We kind of internalize those things because there is a sense of, mixed in with all that is like love and good memories and fun. And so sometimes the trauma kind of gets baked in to our understanding and our relationship with our familial lineage. Or there's a complete rejection. One of the things about being a queer person is that, for many of us, not all of us, a lot of times I can say for myself, in the early days of my, when I was a baby queer, it came out when I was, a teenager, like 15. It really disrupted the dynamics of my immediate family, my biological family. And it felt like the disruption, the way that it was articulated, was a rejection of me in the way that I was choosing to manifest. And so I said, okay, I'll reject you. Bump that, And I began to make my own kind of kinship relationships, which are super important. And deep friendships, some of them I still have, particularly, from college and right after college. But at some point, I did begin to long for my family, my blood family. And I didn't really know how to navigate all of the relationships. And in part, I will say that, meditation, as well as, psychotherapy and other things, began to help me understand that I could have a relationship with my family that wasn't one wherein it had to be a battle. And really, the relationship could be kind of piecemeal, or very, I could have a relationship with individual people, or for a long time it was, just my family, particularly my parents, never asked about my love life or my romantic life, and that, that felt hurtful. But over time, what began to happen is that some of that really began to melt. I began to like not seek their approval, not need their approval. And some of those bonds were mended, particularly with my siblings, my brothers. The relationship is quite strong with them. And, the hurts and some of the reverberations of that continue to this day, But one thing I really discovered was that there had to be a certain level of healing in order for me to have a relationship with my ancestors, right? So that I wasn't kind of stuck or abandoning that relationship, because there are some helpful ancestors that have nothing to do with my parents, right? They're ancestors, And I wanted that channel of my familial lineage to be as clear and as flowing as possible. And that doesn't mean having perfect relationships, but it meant having some kind of peace, making some kind of peace with the things that were actually helpful. So, then we get into maybe something like spiritual lineages. And, spiritual lineages are really interesting because in spiritual communities, whether that's Buddhist communities or, recovery communities or Muslim communities or Christian communities or whatever, there's so much power and there's so much healing and there's so much potential and there's so much community and there's so much juiciness. And mixed in with all that is also confusion, violence, abuse of power, people who are just, I don't know, weird hangers on who just like, come there for the cookies or something, there's all kinds of things that can happen in those spaces, both the physical, like kind of lineage spaces, where particularly we as human beings get really amped up on spiritual power, And spiritual power, I know that this is not something that maybe Buddhists are used to hearing about, but we have to be able to talk about power and the right relation to power, because power is everywhere. There's power, there's spiritual power, there's all, we can't, this power relations. And so what can happen is there can be corruption of the helpful elements of our spiritual lineages because of abuse, because of people power tripping, because of white supremacy, because of patriarchy, and those things begin to warp not the Dharma itself, but the way the Dharma is delivered, received, lands, planted, heard. So in my own case, I've belonged to a few, when I really came to Buddhism, I thought as a teenager, I thought it was a rejection of my evangelical Pentecostal upbringing, right? Like, I don't want anything to do with that, anymore. I found this. And as time went on, particularly when I refuge vows and, to officially become a Buddhist, I realized, oh, wait a minute. First of all, some of this stuff sounds really familiar, which was like freaked me out a little bit. I was like, thought I was getting away from that. But second of all, I realized I couldn't really settle into my Buddhist practice or my life as a Buddhist if I didn't integrate everything that had brought me up to that point. And so, at first I was like, oh, I'm a Buddhist now. I'm not, Christian. But then what I realized was like, oh, my mom waking me up at 5:45 during the week to do devotions, helped me when I would go on retreat. Because I was like, I'm used to this. And I would just like spring up in the morning, and I grew up like being, woken up very early and having all kinds of, weird things go on and spending a lot of time in spiritual spaces, all day Sunday, you know, Black people spend all day in church if you go to church, so all day. And this kind of foundation of not really being afraid of worship and devotion and community and spiritual kind of ecstasy. That really was very familiar when I uh, was introduced to the tantric Buddhist tradition. But in my own, I was in a number of Buddhist communities, and I in 2006 I landed in Shambhala community in New York, and what was really interesting is that the teachings and even the iconography, some of which is on my wall, felt very familiar. It felt very like that. It felt very like coming home. It felt like very like at my heart level. The people, I mean, but the teachings and the kind of way things were delivered felt very captivating. And I felt a very deep connection with the teachings, with the tantric teachings, yes, and I continue to feel that more so as I continue to study with Lama Rod and Lama Justin, and they're both Karma Kagyu Tibetan Buddhist practitioners. I mean, so always felt very connected to the Kagyu and the Nyingma lineages of Tibetan Buddhism or of Tantric Vajrayana Buddhism. But I also felt this very deep connection to Shambhala, which is like a container for the Buddhist teachings, a secular container for the Buddhist teachings. I liked that. And, there were some things that certainly put me off. I was a little baffled by the kind of what I would characterize, and again, this is my characterization, as like worship of Trungpa Rinpoche, which is Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche was an amazing teacher, and he's real. If you say his name to any Lama, everyone knows who he is. Like I've been in stores buying, Buddhist swag for, whatever, and they're like, this guy's like, who's your teacher? And I was like, whoa, and I was like, Sakyam Rinpoche, and he goes, Chogyam Rinpoche's son? Yeah, this was like a couple years ago. So they, very well respected teacher and very powerful, and really really planted tantric Buddhism in the West, both in Europe and the US and Canada and Mexico, actually, and so in North America and Europe. But he's been dead since the mid 80s, and there was still 30 years later, and I made my way to, so I was like, okay, I don't know about that, but the teachings, the way these teachings are like knocking me off my feet. And I also felt a very immediate connection to Sakyam Rinpoche and his wife, Chandra Leon. Just from seeing their picture, I felt there was something, right? And maybe that would, they would Chandra Leon, and maybe people would call that karma, right? There was some kind of connection. And when a few years, and over time, I began to hear these stories about Trungpa Rinpoche that were like, oh, okay, like maybe this dude was an alcoholic, maybe he was a drug addict, maybe he was like a woman. I mean, not maybe, it was like, he was like, he had a lot of wives, and like he, like I know it's the 70s, but still it's weird that he was like had sex with a 15-year-old when he was like 29, and so I was like, this is creepy, and no one's like really talking about it in a way that's like, yeah, like everything's not perfect, but that's part of our lineage, and like we're working through the difficulty and the discomfort of that stuff, like holding how this man was so powerful and so helped many people. And also some of this stuff was really not okay. It was like everything he did was magical. It's like, well, And when my own guru, Sakyam Rinpoche, the sort of was revealed his kind of ongoing things that hadn't been discussed, that revealed around his behavior in terms of sex and drinking. It was very painful. Now, what I will say is that this is everywhere, you know? In my job, we had they had to fire this guy who was like preying on undergraduates for years, years. And these young women would complain, and I mean, it was, and it took years, And or we know about, these different scandals. We can point, the Catholic Church, or in Buddhism, there's plenty of, across all lineages, and even in the the East, there's lots of abuse in the tantric system, physical abuse and sexual abuse. So it's not about, this is about the systemic or lineage wide problem. And so why would, what is there? So sometimes people are like, I reject it all. It's all fake. It's all terrible, and my experience has been that there was nothing in my spirit when these revelations came out in 2018 that said to reject the lineage. What I felt very clearly was that these allegations, which many of them were right on and true, need to be not only recognized, people need to be healed, people need to have amends made to them, and folks up and down the line, from the Sakyong on down to whoever else was named, needs to be held accountable. Some friends of mine burned their books. Some people stopped practicing in Buddhism generally, totally. And I sort of like picked my way through very slowly. Like I just for a year just did shamatha practice. And I just kind of like talked to friends and cried a lot. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm supposed to reject the lineage, even though the organization, Shambhala organization, is not one I want to be a part of. And that took a while to figure out how, the distance. But I knew from my own training as a Buddhist, I knew from my own teaching, I knew from my own teachers that I needed to actually work with discernment and not be either like a loyalist, like everything is fine, everything is great, or be a, someone with a pitchfork. And it's very hard to have equanimity in difficult situations, right? It's like a lot of Tonglen practice, a lot of really just sitting practice. I just like let all the kind of highfalutin Dungeons and Dragons tantric stuff go. And I just was like so disoriented. But there was a part of me that knew, like really deeply, like this is my lineage. And I think for me, part of what was coming up at first was like, frankly, it was embarrassment. Like I hold myself to like a really high standard of ethical behavior. And I was like, I don't want to be associated with it. But it was like the church I grew up in had mad sex scandals, and people are now going online now and being like naming names, and, and like, Me Too, Tarana Burke's life's work has really empowered people to say like, this has happened and it like fucked me up. And no one's ever been accountable to that. And there's no healing that's ever happened. So it wasn't like, that was somehow unfamiliar, but it was so, I felt so much shame. Okay. But the practices never stopped working, feeling empowering. Some some particular practices I, never really connect to. I was like, I'm not doing that or whatever. Some chants I don't do anymore. But, I took Samaya vows with Sakemi Rinpoche in 2016. Jen, when did we do it? When was it? Um, uh, and so that vow is really to, you can think of Samaya as, sometimes people think of it as like just to the guru, but it's really to the lineage. It's really to the practices. It's really to uphold what's been given to me through this doorway, right, that the guru opens. And so I was like, well, I wouldn't give up my refuge vow. I wouldn't give up my bodhisattva vow. And this, I am vowing to be, so I'm reading this really great book right now that Lama Justin recommended. It's right here. It's called A Torch Lighting the Way to Freedom by Dujum Rinpoche Jigro Yeshe Dorje. And there's a really great line. I was actually reading it and I was crying, and I was being a little extra, but it was talking about how, it was talking about spiritual friendship and how none of us, no matter how awake we are, how accomplished we are, we all need spiritual friends, right? And we all need to be connected. I can't find the part, but anyway, it's a really great book. And it's a lot about Nundro, the preliminary practices for anyway, but this idea of being connected to a lineage of spiritual friends. And that and of course, it's like sometimes I think about lineage like I think about thoughts, right? So when you're meditating and thoughts arise, sometimes people are like, a thought came up, I'm hopeless. It's over. The meditation sucked, right? I give up. But it's like, it's just, sometimes it's like sometimes it's like, but we don't give up because there's turbulence or disturbance. We as human beings in our material lives can be a part of reconciliation and healing and transformative justice and restorative justice. But I was entered into this lineage of practitioners who are committed to relieving suffering. And so I can't escape from that because somebody else fucked up. You know what I'm saying? I don't give up on the work that I am responsible for and committed to, And I had to figure out, the thing about the spiritual friend is I cannot do this without a teacher. So I was like, I need a teacher who I have a little bit more contact with. And first I started working with Lama Rod in 2018. And then I started working with both Lama Rod and Lama Justin in 2019. And that has been really profound. And they've entered me into their lineages with certain teachings and empowerments and so forth. And so for me, it's I have begun to really teach. I haven't stopped teaching. I have to really think about to myself, what do these teachings for me in particular, from Shambhala, or what do these teachings from the Karma Kagyu tradition mean to me, and how can I make them relevant to other people? How can I keep them fresh? I got a text from a friend, and I'll wrap up after this. Yesterday, I don't know when anything is, and he said, this is not a bash of any, one of any lineage. I have plenty of friends who are in other lineages who have had a lot of, like I have a lot of friends who were in, Noah Levine was their teacher, and, they went through a lot of really horrible stuff in Dharma punks. But I had a text from a friend who said he had met someone who had come upon Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings, and he really tried to connect with, I don't know where this guy is, with the local Shambhala center, and just felt completely turned off by the people, just like horrible. And, he's a young Black man, so that my friend asked if he can connect me to me and then to another friend in Baltimore. And I think one of the things I'm learning is that, I don't belong to any Sangha, like, organization. I practice with my teachers once a month. I practice with my students once a month. I practice with people in Weekly Dharma. I practice with Muni's Parsha. I practice with a group of friends. Yendon's one of those people. We practice Werma together once a month. And that has been so much freedom to claim and reclaim these practices that are so powerful, because they're there for everyone. They don't belong to one organization or even really one lineage. The Dharma is free. And so I feel called upon to continue to deepen my relationship with the lineage of Shambhala and the practice lineage. So I'm actually taking a course right now on the Kala Chakra Nundro. The Kala Chakra is where the Shambhala teachings came from. And this teacher, who I've never heard of, this Rinpoche, is like deeply invested in the historical and cultural lineage of Shambhala. And so it's really nice to get to know these teachings from a completely different perspective, and someone who specializes in teaching Kala Chakra. And it's like, oh, I can continue to learn and to recultivate, replant these teachings in myself and in others in a way that they can flourish. For others, some other teacher or some other way works. That there's no one way. I'm not saying I've got the goods. I'm just saying that we don't have to give up our relationship to the things that are helpful because the context is harmful. We have to do our own work of healing, of discerning, of finding a teacher or finding a practice community if we can't find a teacher. Making our own communities, just sitting together. That's continuing it. So I think I've said enough. I really am very committed to these teachings, the Shambhala teachings of Windhorse, in particular Ashe, teachings on Ashe, which are really relevant to me as a Black person, because it's very related to the concept of Ashe from Lukumi and Yoruba, which is just the energy of all things, life force. And these various, lineage practices that have become important and that I'm learning more about as I begin to get other practices from my teachers. Chittapati, the protector that's above my shoulder here. And every time I see that sacred world sign, it's something that Dr. Adam LaBelle made, and I like bid on it like years ago. And I just hung it up like 2 years ago, and just reminding myself that that's my outlook, that like shit is sacred, and like, how can I be a part of cultivating sacredness for myself and others? So thank you for joining me, and I'd love to hear any questions you have. If you want to put them in the chat or you want to ask them, I'm ready.
Thank you, Shanté. If anyone has questions, feel free to unmute. or I'll unmute you, or you can go ahead and add questions into the chat.
Yeah,
I
Jeffrey,
can
go
go
ahead.
ahead and speak. Yeah. Hi, Shanté. Thank you so much for your showing up and for sharing your wisdom and your gifts. You're the first person I heard at Shambhala, and a big reason why I had any involvement over the years with that organization. So I really value your sharing on your experience and thoughts with that organization. It's been very healing for me. I just have well, two quick questions, if I may. The first one is, something that's been coming up since leaving Shambhala as far as lineage. And I really value your insights and thoughts on that. But I struggle with it, and I struggle with it because, in my opinion, and is it's kind of part of the system of patriarchy, right? And if we are to abolish patriarchy, how do we honor lineage? Because really, traditionally, in my knowledge of it, it has been a patriarchal, uh, heavily patriarchal system.
You mean the Tibetan system itself?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's
I
been,
mean, all of Buddhism.
yeah,
Right?
all of it,
The
right?
whole shebang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we honor lineage? Okay, that's one question.
And then the second question, which is very separate, I'm an adopted child who was adopted out of
Mm,
foster care.
mm,
And so, of course, naturally,
mm-hmm.
I'm obsessed with
Yes.
lineage and from a familial. I'm the
Yeah.
oldest of four boys. I'm the only adopted child,
Mm.
and I know all the family stories from both my mother's and my father's side because, as being a special child without a lineage. I've always been fascinated, and I'm also just naturally inclined to love the tradition of storytelling. So, which is a big part of lineage. So, but in my own practice, not having access to my birth family and in any way, despite
Yeah.
some efforts to discover that through ancestry, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts or teachings on that situation?
Well, these are great questions. I don't know that I have adequate answers because I think these are both lifelong, these are journeys, these are journey questions. These are questions of discovery, right? And these are inquiries that inform our practice. So let me say something about the second one first. So yeah, I think about this a lot because of the actual physical pain and emotional pain I feel of not knowing who my ancestors are, you know? I mean, on my um, mother's side, my mother who's passed, I have her shrine is right here. I have an ancestor shrine right there. So she's chilling with me. So her mother's still alive. My grandmother's still alive. And so my grandmother has told me, my grandma's 95. So I'm trying to get, the story. So I know she's shown me pictures of her parents, her grandparents, and I know where they're from. So I actually plan to go do some research, in part because also they're from very close to where Harriet Tubman is. And Harriet Tubman is someone who I've adopted as a lineage ancestor and as a protector. So I have a protector shrine with her and my deceased dog's ashes and James Baldwin, right? So that's part of like filling in the gaps. It's like, okay, I feel a connection with you. So people you just feel connection with, Audre Lorde has been a big part of my life, Toni Morrison. So these people I just pull in. So I understand what you're saying. I'm not an adoptee, but my father's father was adopted. So it stops right there. So there's a lot to work with in terms of what the expansiveness of what lineage could be. It could be kin, right? It could be family. It could be ship is like choice, family of choice, right? And sometimes some of us, whether it's through colonialism or through dispossession, start off with talking about the indigenous people of where I am, people's land and records being destroyed or not being allowed to keep their records or speak their language. So I'm like, where am I from? Where are my people from? And so that, is very disorienting. And it's disorienting, not just for me individually, but collectively for Black people in diaspora, right? Or anyone who's experienced centuries of diaspora. In the first instance, patriarchy, child. I mean, woo. So very interesting. I think one thing for me that's been helpful is to be like, oh, if you think about when the world's major religions arose, all sort of around the same time, the world was very different in some ways, but it was very different. I just read something today that said, we experience in a week what people 100 years ago experienced over their entire lifetime, right? The amount of the news and this and then. So just imagine 2,500 years ago, it was like, Dr. Larry Ward says, I don't know if you don't know Larry Ward, he's an amazing Buddhist teacher in the Insight tradition, also a Baptist minister. But he says, it's like we need a 2.0 in some ways, because our system is like meant to encounter like one woolly mammoth a month, and we encounter like one a day. You know what I mean? So the patriarchal, even if you look at the Buddha story and the way it's told, oh, Shakyamuni was born, he had this, the Brahmin said he was going to be amazing and told his father, who was a king, and his mother was a queen. It's like, well, he probably was like a chieftain's son. And his father said, no, don't be, and then you like never hear about his mother again. He gets married, you don't know her name, Yashodhara. And then he has a son, Rahula, who's like kind of a dum-dum. And then he leaves his wife and kid to go on a spiritual journey. And we're like, I take refuge in the Buddha as an example. And so what happens now is dudes are like, peace out. I'm going to go on retreat for 4 years, honey. And the wife's like, no, you're not. Where are you going? So we have to think about these stories that we're told. What happened, right? So Yashodhara and her mother-in-law ended up for years going to the historical Buddha and saying, okay, I saw you in diapers, but all right, fine. Why can't we be part of this? And he was like, okay. And then the dudes were like, no, they're women. Yuck, gross. 12 years. They shaved their heads, right? Finally, they're, in Yashodhara, and I'm forgetting his mother's name, who was really his aunt, but whatever. They became great, teachers. Great realized teachers. So even in that, we could think about those early, that patriarchy was so powerful that it informed how the Buddhist practices were delivered. Sometimes we think about Islam this way, or sometimes we think about Orthodox Judaism this way, or sometimes we think about Christianity this way. But because patriarchy was such a powerful force that all these spiritual, Hinduism, which predated Buddhism, all these powerful spiritual transformative things were somehow not powerful enough to destroy patriarchy. Because men, or male-bodied people, got the goods. They got power, more power and standing, and they weren't invested necessarily in destroying that system. So yes, with lineage, you inherit all of it. You don't get to, just like your ancestors. Sometimes I'll talk to white folks when we talk about ancestry and they say, I know I have a slaver in there. I know I had someone who owned human beings. You have to make peace with the reality of that. Because if you don't, you cannot experience the power of your ancestral lineage. If you allow, you know, and that can be like, there's someone abusive in your family, you know what I mean? We have to figure out how to heal ourselves, because the healing, as Lamarad says, goes, you can heal backwards. You know, you can heal those ancestors who are still suffering. The karma of people who stole people, raped them, you know, killed them is horrible. They're suffering still. So how do we heal backwards too, right? So how do we heal patriarchy backwards? How do we heal our lineage? It's up to us. It's not set in stone, right? It's not set in stone. We're not just receiving, it goes. So we can also be part of that healing by saying, this system, which y'all didn't recognize as something destructive because it was so, there was no, well, there were other models, right? Because there's matrilineal, those just aren't popular religions, right? But in terms of global religions, but when people could figure it out, oh, religion, people like this religion or like this whatever, and that can go hand in hand with government, perfect. You know what I mean? Now, or social structure, perfect. Now we've got it, right? So there was not the awareness there is now. And so it is like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff about the lineage, you know, various lineages that I'm like, I don't like. But the power of the lineage is that each of us is responsible for waking up the lineage a little bit more, you know, not just repeating things, but helping it to stay alive by dissolving what is in the way. Yes, is it Jean-Marie? Jean-Marie?
Jean-Marie, I thank you so much for this talk. Just yesterday, Alice and I were talking about, you know, integrating our Christianity and that you don't actually grow out of those lineages that inform who you are today. And as you talked about how you learned about, you know, the human failings of Chogyam Trungpa and the abuses and everything, I think the openness is part of what's been missing. And we keep forgetting that, you know, life is suffering and we're suffering the effects of being human, and the practices are what help us try to heal some of that human, you know, our habitual craziness.
Mm-hmm.
It feels kind of like an enormous opportunity has opened up for us to really, really get serious about practicing and stop worrying about, oh, do we have this power structure of an organization that we can
That's right.
cling to? And so, you know, I can say in our Shambhala organization, we are struggling mightily and trying to kind of, you know, revitalize and restore. And meanwhile, in our own heads are questioning, is that really what people want? Is that what I want? And I think, you know, that issue of needing the connection and the teacher and all that is what the real struggle is for me. I really appreciate and have grown from the connection and from wrestling with the human beings.
Yeah.
And their frailties and my, you know, rubbing up against my own. So I don't know if that's a question, but it really, I appreciated so much your talk.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're talking, I was thinking about in another context. I'm in a 12-step recovery, and one of the things I've noticed in COVID is like people want things to be exactly the same, and there's all this stuff that's emerging. Like people are like, oh, I can have meetings where I actually don't deal with racism, or I don't deal with sexism or homophobia, or I feel comfortable and I don't have to, like, those norms weren't good, right? Some of the norms, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
or people who are like, oh, I have a newborn and like, but I can like hop on Zoom and like, I don't, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like how easy human beings can turn something good into fix it. Okay, this is how it is. Nope, nope. People said this 75 years ago, or someone said this 2000 years ago, and it's just that way. And then we look at other people who will like still, do the old ways, and we laugh at them, but we're the same way, And so this doesn't mean like don't have a foundation, right? And just, oh, I'm just going to try this and try that. But there has to be some experimentation, right? My feet are planted on the ground, and my head, it's like, I'm supposed to look around, you know what I mean? I'm supposed to like take in the freshness of the day, and not, it's like you would not drink water from 3 days. I mean, it's just water gets briny and goes bad, right? And it's not, if it's not fresh water is good, And so it's interesting, the balance of holding tradition and lineage and understanding, oh, I need a spiritual friend. I need a community. I need someone, multiple people, hopefully, who've walked this path. It's very interesting having two teachers right now. I mean, Lamarad is a little unavailable because he's a superstar. But anyway, I just text him when I want. I just text him when I want, But it's very interesting because they're both come from Karma Kagyu, but are very different in their styles, and have very different stories, and like they complement each other very well in terms of how they, run Bhumi Sparsha and everything. But I'm like, oh, multiple perspectives is actually really good, And they both talk to me about their own experiences, right? Both of them have come from, problematic Buddhist communities, you know what I mean? And so, the Karma Kagyu lineage, they have two Karmapas. They don't know what's going on, you know what I mean? They're trying to figure it out, So we're all struggling, but there can be some playfulness and some freshness and some, oh, these teachings are really helpful. These practices are really helpful. How can we, as Trungpa Rinpoche said, make it be like it's open, like an open hand, rather than you come in, you don't know anything, I know everything, I'm going to just pour, I'm going to teach you everything, instead of like, oh, you're South Asian, you probably know more about this shit than I do, right? Or what are your connections to this? Instead of, no, you don't know anything, I know everything, and you have to do it exactly like this, sit exactly like this, look exactly like this, breathe. Well, then it becomes dead. The form is meant to free us. It's meant to free us. It's meant to free us. It's meant to sort of discipline us enough and then free us so that we can really practice and be of benefit to other people. And the real key for me is, who is hearing the teachings, right? Is it just me and my 5 friends and we're hoarding it to ourselves? Or are they spreading? I don't need to take credit for it. I don't need, it doesn't matter. It's about, and particularly with Tantra, the tantric path is dangerous because it's powerful. Because it's meant to say, I do not want people to suffer for 7 or 14 or 21 lifetimes. So I am going to walk on this diamond path, which is treacherous and scary and hard and requires a lot of me, so that other people can wake up in one lifetime and I can end suffering. It's all about, it's all about that basic thing of like, wanting to lead people out of suffering. And if we're too busy going down the toilet bowl of our own suffering because, you know, someone didn't read this at the beginning, I don't even know whatever, you know, we get, it's human. You know, we were like, it's not just human. My dog is the same way. She's like, hello, it's 5 p.m. It's time for me to eat. And I'm like, you know, it's like, you know, but because part of the Buddhist practice, the meditation practice is self-reflection or seeing what is, we should be able to see, oh, this is actually a little tight. This is actually a little rigid. This is actually a little, maybe we need to do an inventory, you know, like do people feel welcome here? Do people feel that they have a stake? Is the space accessible? I mean, right? We ask these questions to keep things fresh. And so I think a little experimentation, you know, a little play is useful. Yeah. Thank you. Hi, Sally.
Hi, Shanté. Thank
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So this brings up so much for me. I had an intuition, you know, your name just came into my mind on Monday, and I went online and I saw that you were talking on Wednesday, and I signed up. And it was like, okay, I need to connect with Shanté. So you know, I'm in Shambhala in Atlanta, and I've been holding the space. I haven't given up on Shambhala Atlanta for sure, because
right.
those are my people, right?
Yeah.
But Shambhala International, anything to do with it makes me nauseous, and I just don't have anything to do with it. But I was still giving them money, and I was still like, I haven't given back my samaya to the Sakyong, right? But that holding, it felt right, but just this, I mean, I'm starting to have some feelings of, no, I can let go. I can actually let go. You know, I'm having dreams that are telling me it's time to let go. But it's very, I mean, I've been in Shambhala for 20 years, and I thought it was my whole life.
Yes.
You know that. I mean, I think you know me enough to know that, right?
Yes, yes.
And I'm grieving. So that's what I realized just this week, that I'm really grieving that connection. But at the same time, there's grief and there's relief. Oof.
Yes.
Like I don't have to do that. It's not the only way. It's not the fucking Catholic Church, you know, it's not the only way. And so that I'm feeling more space this week, and I'm really happy to share that with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, we're supposed to be free, you know, it's liberation. It's about liberation. And so whatever contributes to your liberation, you know, and your ability to help others experience liberation. And for some of us, I have a student who was in one of the insight traditions, I'm forgetting the Goenka, for 20 years, 18 years. And they're really like, literally watch videos of their dead, you know, lineage. He's been dead, Goenka's been dead forever, you know? And it was like, you can, this how you do it, and you can, and you're not this, and you're not, and you know, and even after, I think we've been working together maybe 2 or 3 years, and she's like, a powerful teacher and amazing practitioner, and feels like she, you know, she's still shedding that training that she's not worthy to, she's only worthy to be of service in, like, you know, picking up cushions, but not teaching, right? And so it takes time. And one of the things I would say to her is like, do not give up your practices that are beneficial. You don't need to like throw them away and, find something new, but it's about shedding the kind of the whatever is not useful. And that will come off on its own in many cases. The practices, we kind of have to practice to see what's, okay, this feels, first of all, I have a gazillion practices. I can't tell you, I don't do many of them. I'm like, oh, I've never done this practice, or I don't even remember having it, right? So it's not about doing everything, but it's, again, in some ways, although as I read from the Torch book, we do need a teacher, right? But it's also about going to the source. And sometimes a teacher is right for a certain amount of time. They die, or they're far away, or, and it's fine to have multiple teachers. It's like I have a root guru, Sakya Rinpoche. I don't practice with him. And I have 2 teachers that I practice with. And it's like, that's actually super typical. That's like very typical, right? And so I think like being able to hold grief and relief, being able to hold a deep commitment to the lineage and an understanding that that lineage wants us to be free, perhaps free of an organization. It's very interesting for me practicing. I don't belong to an org. I feel a little like, like people are like, oh, what's, and I'm like, I don't, I have a lineage. I belong to the tantric lineage, specifically Shambhala, Rime, Nyingma, Kagyu, right? Organization, and so it's been a little interesting, but it's like, I practice with my teachers once a month. I meet with my teacher once a month, and so additionally via Zoom. So there's a group of us that practice with Lama Justin together, and then, meet with him individually. Just like my students meet with me individually, we practice together. So those are my sanghas. Practice with a group of friends. We do a BIPOC group. We do Rama together, practice with weekly Dharma gathering. I practice with Bhumi Sparsha. And so for me, having a relationship to the teacher that I'm in contact with, and the Dharma and these various sanghas has made me feel very invigorated, but I also feel a little like, sometimes I really miss, going to my place, but everything is, impermanent. Sometimes impermanence is like really loud. And you're like, oh, this is not just a thing we say, but it's very real. And it's also a process. So I want people to go easy on themselves. I'm in a process, and I don't want to go into it too much, but in a therapeutic sense, working through some, family stuff, and realizing that there's a family member who was like a terrorist in my family. He terrorized people. And he's been dead for a long time, but it's like, I'm realizing how that has tainted my whole view of that side of the family. And that without saying, like, he was a great guy, but no, he was a monster in the lifetime that he, I knew him. There's also something else there, right? There's a much longer lineage that I don't have access to yet, and that I want to have access to. And so, when the betrayal is from a spiritual friend or a spiritual community, it's very like family almost, because spiritual communities are places that people go to for refuge and protection. People go to church, and they go to mosque, and they go to Buddhist centers, and they go to temples for healing and for protection and for comfort and for guidance. And when the people who are there are not working with their own very human stuff, and they then are passing on their confusion, it's a really deep pain. And not just passing their own confusion, right, which we can all do, but passing on their own confusion and then pretending that they're not, right? So like then the gaslighting quality. So it's hurt and then gasping, right? And then I'm the pastor, or I'm the guru, or I'm the priest, or I'm the whatever. So too bad. And then you have the power of the organization behind that. That can destroy lives. It has destroyed many, many millions of people's lives, And so we may feel so small, but all we need is one other friend who wants to practice with us. And then we, another student, he's really looking for a teacher, and, like a guru. And so I'm suggesting different people to him. I work with him, and I'm suggesting different people in different communities he tries out. Kagyu community, and it's, not great. And so sometimes that's part of our journey too, is finding a teacher and that feels comfortable with us. And we feel like the community the teacher is building is actually one of transparency, freshness, where things flow both ways. It's not, hierarchy is not bad. The only time hierarchy is bad is when it's unidirectional. You listen to what I say, when it's about dominance. Right? But when it's about holding, like the teacher holds the space. That's like the parent holds the space for the child. The parent doesn't say, take yourself to school, kid, when they're 4 years old, right? The parent is responsible for the child. But there are ways that responsibility can be resented or dominant, right? But there's a natural hierarchy there. Like, I'm responsible for this. So like, as a teacher, I am responsible. The more power I have, the more responsibility I have. My responsibility and care matches the level of power. That's how you have a right relationship with power. If it's just power without care or responsibility, then you end up really hurting people very badly. And I have to be willing to work on my stuff, which is exhausting, hard, boring, scary, time consuming. And then, for me, what feels really genuinely powerful is being between a teacher and a student. So if I'm teaching, I have to have a teacher. I don't care how, whatever I am, I have to be in relationship to someone who can. So I'll say it like this. In the tantric tradition, we're dealing with energy, other beings, gods, right? You're connecting with these energies. And some of them are purely helpful. Some of them are tricky. Some of them are whatever they need to be, right, in order to wake us up. So that can make you a little, you can get a little lost in the spiritual realm, lost in talking to your, friends who don't have material bodies. And if you're just in the sky like that, your view of your students or other people can be a little careless, right? So it's like you're in the God realm in a way. You're like kind of like not really connected with the suffering that human beings are experiencing, because you're too, right? So there has to be that grounded quality of like, wow, I'm trying to think of something I do. I am like often annoyed. I'm just like a grumpy person. And it's like, it's for no reason. And that's something I have to really work on, because it can make me dismissive of people. Right. So I have to really work on that quality that is, and discover the wisdom aspect of that, which is usually something to do with, I like spending time one-on-one with people, right? So there's no shortcuts, but this is about cultivating communities, cultivating questions, inquiry. Our practice is also one of inquiry. You know, I'm like, I don't know what this word means. Google it. Who is this? My teacher gave me this practice. I don't know about this. Who is this person? Who is this being that you're saying? What's this chant? I don't know about that. Let me look it up, right? That's great. You know, that's I tell my students to I try to give them as much information. I say, find out for yourself, you know. So for instance, and with this, so we did the 7-line supplication, or I did the 7-line supplication to Padmakara, and like in the beginning, I looked up every aspect. I'm like, okay, where's Uddiyana? What is who? What are they? And over time, I have developed my own relationship with Guru Rinpoche that's very alive. That's not just because he's the dude who, tamed Tibet and brought tantric Buddhism to Tibet, but because I like him, because I feel connected to him. So I think I want to just say thank you for showing up and bringing yourselves and your questions. Next week is David Perrin, and he's teaching about, I think it's called I Like the Sound of Your Voice. I'm going to try to join, and it's about finding a teacher. I feel like that's the most important thing, I'm always like telling people, go work with Lama Ra, go work with Lama Justin. They're amazing, they're really good, especially if you're a tantric practitioner. They're very, very good. They're very ethical. And they're very fun and non-dominant. And that the Bhumi Sparsha community really kind of runs itself and are really empowered. And there's a lot of people from a lot of different lineages in that community. And it's not particularly, I'm not like a member of Bhumi Sparsha, but I practice with them certain things, I'm a Shambhalian. There's nothing I can do about it. That's my lineage. I'm like, I've tried. So I'm like, oh, well, this is my lineage. And so what am I going to do with that knowledge? That this is my lineage. That has nothing to do with an organ or the many different because there's every ocean and this and the ocean Dharma and Dharma ocean and I don't know what, and open Tory, and there's too much, you know what I mean? But that's my lineage, right? That's my lineage, the lineage of Sakyans, of which I am one, right? And so what am I going to do with that lineage? Am I going to let it die on the vine? Because it's supposed to be rhizomatic, go in all directions. The 12 directions means with every direction, right? 12 cardinal directions, or the 4 cardinal directions in other directions. I don't know, whatever the names. People at Gamble Abbott know this better. It's supposed to go in all directions, right? Not just one, So thank you. Sheena, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Shanté, and thank you everyone who showed up live for us. And thank you to everyone who's watching the recording. As Shanté mentioned, please join us next week. David Perrin will be doing a talk on, it's called I Like the Sound of Your Voice, Choosing a Teacher for Longer Term Practice and Study. I dropped the link in the chat already, so please check that out. It matches so perfectly with Shanté's talk tonight. If you are not already a weekly Dharma Gathering subscriber, please consider it. We have a 7-day trial running right now. You can find that on our website, and you can check out all of the recorded archives that we have right now. And please be sure to spread the word to your friends about Weekly Dharma Gathering. We love seeing your beautiful faces. You can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram at Weekly Dharma, and we're also on Facebook at Weekly Dharma Gathering. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you again, Shanté.
Thank you so much, y'all. Good to see you all. Be safe. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shanté.
Thank you. Thank you.